I'm going to start the share by starting to answer the question that I asked actually a couple of months ago. I apologize for holding it off, but I had so much to say before. But we had a very serious question, and that question was the following. The difference between Klal Yisrael, between the Jews, and between all the other biblical period, the difference between Klal Yisrael and the people that went before was the fact that Klal Yisrael was considered guaranteed, whereas before, in the earlier period, Adam Rishon and the 10 generations of the flood and the 10 generations of the Dor HaFlaga, the Tower of Babel, those generations could earn Olam Haba, but they can also lose it. They were not guaranteed by the 7 mitzvahs to be able to get Olam Haba. And therefore that era was called the era of Tohu, confusion or void. Because they were guaranteed, the children of Abraham, the children of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, were all given Taryag mitzvahs, which instituted this guarantee. Because many of the mitzvahs were not only performance commandments, but they also were rehabilitation, so that if you sinned, you can rehabilitate yourself by performing different mitzvahs. And a lot of those mitzvahs had to do with the Beis HaMikdash, or had to do with korbanos, sacrifices or animals that were sacrificed and so on, that constituted a guarantee for the Jewish people that even if they sinned, God would eventually forgive them, and so on. And the 630 mitzvahs supplied them with the ability to rehabilitate themselves from sin. So the Gemara, the Brisa says, a Gemara that says that the history of mankind, which will be 6,000 years, is divided into 3 periods. The period of Tohu, which is the period of a void, where, in other words, the attribute of justice holds supreme, and if the people of that time don't do the mitzvahs that they were supposed to do, Adam Rishon with 1 mitzvah, and the rest of mankind after him with 7 mitzvahs, they would lose their chelik in Olam Haba. That period of Tohu would only last 2,000 years. And the next 2,000 years was devoted to the Jews, to the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and they were given 630 mitzvahs, and it was stated in that Brisa that period would also last for 2,000 years. Finally, the Gemara says that the last period will last 2,000 years, and it is called the Yemoshe Mashiach. That's what it's called. So we want to understand what's going on. What does that mean? It's called the Yemoshe Mashiach. The Yemoshe Mashiach is actually any time the Mashiach comes. The Mashiach can come at any time in human history and initiate a certain period called the Yemoshe Mashiach, the days of the Mashiach. And in that period, the world would experience a tahara, a complete cleaning of all the negative energy of sins. And the world would return to the level of Adam Rishon before he sinned. So each of these periods, Tohu was Torah, and Yemoshe Mashiach would last 2,000 years. But what does that mean, that the last period, Yemoshe Mashiach, would last 2,000 years? Technically speaking, the Yemoshe Mashiach can come any time that the Jewish people are Zocher, and so on. So what does that actually mean? So what it actually means is that even though the Mashiach can come at any time in human history, you see, but the last 2,000 years, God would bring down to the earth, to the world, the Nun Share Bina, which is the light of the Mashiach. the Nun, the 50th gate of wisdom, which is called the Nun Sha'arei Bina, would come down to the earth, and with that light, the Mashiach would be able to completely transform mankind into a world where the knowledge of God would cover the sea. Like it says, and the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of God as the waters cover the sea. And the knowledge of God is not simply a thought or a concept. The knowledge of God will be equivalent to a sensation. It's almost as if you see God, which of course is impossible. God has no visual. But it's like you would believe in God because you can sense His presence as an actual sensation. In certain ways, it will be similar to Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, where a tzaddik can sense a certain particular fact that you cannot know the fact by logic or by experience. So suddenly mankind would experience the God, the Rebbeinu Shalom, in all His kedusha and His holiness, as if it was a sensation. So the Yemot Mashiach, as the final 2,000-year period of human history, indicates a period of history when God would bring down the 50th gate. He would bring down the fundamental instrument which would enable the Mashiach to bring a certain kedusha, holiness to the world, where suddenly the world would be knowledgeable about the existence and the presence of God. Who was the Mashiach? And not only that, there would be a certain individual that will actually become a Mashiach. In other words, not only would the 50th gate come down to the earth, but there will be a person who would be Zocher, who would be worthy of becoming the actual Mashiach. Because the Mashiach himself is simply a person who has access to the 50th gate. He has access to that level of Kedusha knowledge that characterize his particular stature. And this person, the Gemara actually refers to this person. This person is Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, and so on. So the question was, how was Rabbi Akiva, how did he become the Mashiach? How was he able to access the 50th gate? And the answer is, he and 4 Tanoim went into a garden, and that garden represents the 50th gate. A garden in Hebrew is Pardes, and that stands for Pshat, the simple meaning of the Torah, Remez, the kind of the hinting, deeper meaning of the Torah, Dvush, the concept of Darshan, in which he explains what the Torah means in all details, and Sod, the mysteries of the Torah, which actually refers to the mysteries of why God does what He does, exactly how He does everything, and it explains the whole creation of the world, and so on. So Rabbi Akiva and 3 other Tanoim sages went into the garden, which means they had access to this knowledge. Only Rabbi Akiva exited. He was the only one that was Zocher to leave unharmed from therefore accessing this. And I spoke about this at length in previous Yom. So therefore, we were suddenly involved in a period with Rabbi Akiva, who lived slightly after the destruction of the temple, and so on. And he had the 50th gate. And not only did he have the 50th gate, but he was the Mashiach. He was the Mashiach ben Yosef, the man who's assigned the ability and the task of bringing the Messianic Gula, the Messianic period, to the world, to the end of time. So these 2 things existed at that time, Rabbi Akiva and the 50th gate. And it was the intention of God to start the Messianic period at that time. So the question remains, why did God destroy the temple? Because the temple was necessary for the Jews to rehabilitate themselves should they sin. The temple accepted many sacrifices, And the whole worship of the temple was to give the Jewish people, called Israel, the ability to rehabilitate themselves. Even if they sinned, they would bring certain sacrifices for each of the sins, and so on. And I mentioned this before. But around that time, slightly before Rabbi Akiva, God destroyed the temple by the Romans, because the Romans came and destroyed the temple. There was no such instrument of rehabilitation anymore. So therefore, how were the Jews able to be guaranteed that they survive without a temple? The main thing that the Jewish people had was a temple, the Beis HaMikdash, which allowed this possibility. And how were they able to survive without the temple? And so on. So this is the question that I asked quite a while ago, and I said I would try and answer it. And fundamentally, the answer is that this third period, which is called the Yemos HaMashiach, has started with that of Rabbi Akiva and slightly before, and the truth is it's never ended. In other words, what I'm saying is a tremendous concept. We are living in the actual Yemos HaMashiach. We are not waiting for the Yemos HaMashiach to appear. We are actually living in the Yemos HaMashiach. So you can say to me, well, how's that possible? The Mashiach hasn't arrived. It's been 2,000 years since Rabbi Akiva died, approximately, and so on. And we don't see hide nor hair of the Mashiach. What does that mean that the Yemos HaMashiach has already started with slightly before Rabbi Akiva and at that time? And what does that mean that we have the 50th gate? We don't see any hide nor hair of the 50th gate. In the yeshivas, they don't have the 50th gate of the Torah, which is the highest level of the knowledge of Torah. We see that they're studying Torah, they're studying Gemara, basically, and so on and so forth, and the Shulchan Aruch and so on, but we don't see any concept of a 50th gate. So what does that mean that the Yemos HaMashiach is already here? Well, when God finally assigned Rabbi Akiva as the Mashiach, he had no intention of backtracking. It was God's intention that from then on, it would be available, the 50th gate, and that the Mashiach would be living at that time in some form or another. Even though Rabbi Akiva died, there were people after him who continued this process. So the question is, what does this mean? How does this mean? How can we say that we are in the Yemos HaMashiach when every indication indicates that the Jews are on the lowest level possible in all of their history? So how can we say that there is the Yemos HaMashiach? Well, first of all, we said that the reason for this was because of the sinas chinam, the unwarranted hatred and disrespect that one Jew has for another, and so on. And there are two categories of mitzvahs. There are mitzvahs bein adam l'makom, between man and God, like Shabbos and Kashrus and Tefillin and so on. And then there are mitzvahs bein adam l'chaveroi, mitzvahs between man and man. You know, like for example, there was mitzvahs of chesed, to do chesed to another Jew. There were mitzvahs of tzedakah, charity. For example, there was mitzvahs of the matnas kahuna, where we gave the kohanim the trumas, mitzvahs where we gave the leviim the maisus, and so on. There were many mitzvahs that had to do with charity, and so on. So God demanded two types of behaviors from us. He demanded the behaviors that would relate to him, and he demanded behaviors that would relate to the Jews. And why was it so important for the mitzvahs to relate to other Jews? Because fundamentally, the Jewish people are not a collection of people with a certain task. No, the Jewish people are considered an organism. An organism, they are considered as one unit, as a team, who all had to do with the same goal, to bring the knowledge of God to the world and to raise the spirituality of the world from then on. And they would do this as an organism, as a series of people who are all related to each other. When the Tefillin, it says, Kol Yisrael Arev Zel Hazeh, every Jew is considered a guarantee for another Jew. It means that they're really one system. The Jewish people are one system, an organism, just like the human body is an organism. And therefore, God said that even though I have given you a certain purpose, I've given you a certain tachlis for the organism, where you have to be a people of God, and you have to be a people of who represents peace among you, and respect and love. And God said that even though I have given you a dangerous task, because to go to the world, to go to the nations of the world and tell them about God and what they are obligated to do is fundamentally a dangerous task, because the world would hold them responsible for this thing. So God said, if you remain an organism, if you are a unified people who love each other like brothers and sisters, like members of a family, I will protect you. In other words, so therefore we see what the Jewish people were. And approximately at the time, all the time before, the Jewish people have had very hard, it was very difficult for them to act in this way. Even though the Jewish people were able to perform the mitzvahs beinadam lamokum, between man and God, relatively easily, they kept the Torah, they kept all 630 mitzvahs, and when they failed to do some of those mitzvahs, they brought korbanos in the Beis HaMikdash to rehabilitate themselves. But it was very difficult for them to keep the mitzvahs that had to do with their fellow man. There were very few times in history when the Jewish people reached the madrega of being an organism. And that time, which was the time of Rabbi Akiva, it was the most important time for them to be an organism. Because the Yemot HaMashiach, the Messianic period, cannot truly happen. It cannot transpire unless Klal Yisrael is an organism, is a unit who fundamentally respect each other and love each other as a family. And if this doesn't exist, if this condition does not exist, then the Messianic period cannot be. That even though there could be a Mashiach, he cannot manifest himself as a Mashiach if the Jewish people are not an organism. And because of the specific sins of that time, especially in the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, which I've already examined, the Jewish people were on a very low madrega. In fact, it says at that time, the Jewish people learned a lot of Torah. At the time of Rabbi Akiva, the Jewish people learned a lot of Torah, and they so on. So therefore the question is asked, why was the temple was destroyed? So it says because even though they learned Torah, they were very knowledgeable people, they did not make a blessing on the Torah. And fundamentally, what does this mean? They didn't make a blessing on the Torah. In other words, the relationship between the two categories of mitzvahs, beinadam lamokum, beinadam lachaveroi, were divided. You see, there's a certain concept which many Jews do not understand and do not relate to. What exactly is the relationship of these two categories of mitzvahs? The mitzvahs that have to do with God, and the mitzvahs that have to do with the relationship with other people. What exactly is the relationship of the two? Well, the fact is, if the Jewish people keep the mitzvahs beinadam lamokum, between man and God, but they don't observe the mitzvahs in sincerity between man and man, between one Jew and another. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that they are missing a category of mitzvahs, but what it does mean that even the category of mitzvahs between the man and God is being transgressed. In other words, you cannot divide these two categories. You cannot do the mitzvahs between man and God and not do the mitzvahs between man and man. Because if that happens, it's considered as if you don't do the mitzvahs even between man and God. Why is this? Why is it that either you do all the mitzvahs or it's considered like you do none of the mitzvahs. Why is it an all or none situation? And that's because of the relationship of the Jewish people to each other and their relationship to God. The Jewish people are an organism, but in essence they're a family. They relate to each other as brothers and sisters, and therefore they are family, and God therefore relates to them as a father. But if the Jews don't behave to each other as brothers and sisters, that means they cannot relate to God as a father, because he is an integral part of this whole family structure. So that's why God is very angry when the Jews don't respect and they hate each other randomly for no reason at all. God has more pain between the absence of the mitzvahs between Jew and Jew than he has between the mitzvahs of himself. And we find that the Gemara says this in terms of the flood. The reason why God destroyed the world in terms of the flood is because they were all sinning in the mitzvahs that had to do between man and man. And since this is the main category, they were stealing and they were doing all kinds of sins that related to each other. This was extremely painful for God, Kaviyachol, so to speak. So God decided to destroy the world because when the people of that time, the people of the flood, disrespect each other and hate each other and rob from each other and so on and so forth, then God is no longer a father. In other words, if you don't have a family situation between brothers and sisters, if the Jewish people don't consider themselves a family, then God is not considered a father. And therefore, he is involved in that category. So therefore, it is impossible to do the mitzvahs between man and God without doing the mitzvahs between man and man. They are both linked to each other, and they are both linked. So therefore, this is a very important thing. So fundamentally, because of the fact that the Jews manifested, they did not manifest the mitzvahs between man and man. There was an extreme amount of hatred between one Jew and another, as exemplified in the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, and so on, that God said to them, I am not your father if you are not brothers and sisters, and therefore I will not bring the Yemos Mashiach. I will, however, keep this period as a time of Yemos Mashiach, because I will keep the 50th gate down on the earth. I will not retract it. I will not retrieve the 50th gate. I have brought the 50th gate down to the world to bring the redemption, the Geula, and I will keep it there. But since you Jews are not worthy of being a family and me being your father, I'm going to confiscate certain aspects of the Geula, and I'm going to put it into a negative Golus. And this is a very powerful concept. What does that mean, a negative Golus? The Geula is a positive thing. It means that the presence of God comes back to the world, and he brings the redemption with Mashiach. But a negative Geula means that he puts the Geula down. All the characteristics which accrue to the Geula are actually here, but they're not visible. In other words, God brings a Geula which is totally invisible. And how does he do that? He does that by absenting the presence of certain characteristics that relate to the Geula. And these characteristics are not visible to the Jewish people. So even though the Jewish people are in the Yemos Mashiach, technically, they don't have any idea of this. They don't see this and so on. And that's what it means, a negative Geula. What does it mean that God is bringing a negative Geula? Well, let's analyze this and let's see exactly what I mean by this. The Torah says that the Jewish people represent two basic ideas. They represent the idea of a Goy Kodesh, a holy nation, a holy people. And that idea is consummated when the Jewish people perform the mitzvahs. When the Jewish people perform the mitzvahs, as it states in the Torah, the Taryag mitzvahs, they are called the holy period people, and therefore they have a certain tiferes. The word tiferes the word means beauty, and when the Jewish people maintain their holiness by performing the mitzvahs in the Torah, they actually exhibit a certain beauty, a beauty of their form, a beauty of their structure, because the kedusha that the Jews have is extraordinary. In fact, in the Birchas HaShachar, which we say in the morning, it says, Oiter Yisrael b'Sephora. God crowns the Jewish people with beauty. And that's the beauty of their souls, the beauty of their minds, the beauty of their existence, because they become an extraordinarily beautiful people, a perfect people, as a symbol of God's power. So therefore, the fact that they are a Goy Kodesh means they have extraordinary beauty. Another thing which is said about them is that they are Memlechet Kahanim. They are also a kingdom of priests. And what does this mean? This means that it is their purpose to bring the knowledge of God to the world. Since the world has really departed from the presence of God in any real sense, in the truthful sense, God has assigned this task to the Jewish people to represent Him in the world and to bring the knowledge of His presence to the world. In that category, they're called the Mamlechet Kohanim. And these are two categories that would exist for the Jews in the time of the Mashiach. There would be a Goy Kodesh, a holy people, and there would be a Mamlechet Kohanim, a kingdom of priests. And then they would reign over the world as the most important nation in the world. They would have a holiness that's unlike any other nation in the world. And that holiness would give them a tremendous level of tiferes, of beauty and success. But what happens if the Jews are not worthy of this? What happens if the Jews keep the Torah, which they did, but yet somehow they don't keep it amongst themselves? They don't respect each other. They don't treat each other with the love of a brother and a sister. What happens if the Jews absent themselves from being an organism? So God says, I will bring Mashiach and I will bring the 50th gate, but it will not become visible. It will not become visible. So if it doesn't become visible, who will be the Mashiach and where is the 50th gate? If God says, I have brought down to the world the 50th level, where is it? We don't see it. And if God says to the Jews, and I will make you the heads of the world, and so on and so forth. Well, the Jews are the lowest people on earth. They have been persecuted by every nation on earth, and by almost every nation, the Christians, the Muslims, and so on and so forth. So where do we see at all this concept that the Jews are so important? We don't see this at all. So this is exactly a meaning. God has hidden this messianic concept from the Jewish people. Now, what exactly does that mean? First of all, we have to go back to the bracha of Isaac, of Yitzchak. That bracha, which Yitzchak gave to his son, Yaakov and Esav, fundamentally symbolize what the negative gula is. And I may have spoken about it once before, but I want to mention what it means because it's extremely important. Yitzchak gave a blessing to Yaakov and Esav. And what Yaakov did, Esav was basically the firstborn, and therefore Esav was supposed to be the first recipient of that bracha. So what Yaakov did, with the help of his mother, Rivka, he disguised himself as Esav because Yitzchak was blind. And Yaakov put on fur on his skin because Esav was very hairy. And when he came to Yitzchak, he said, I am Esav, give me the blessing that you have to give me. So Yitzchak gave him a blessing. It was the blessing he wanted to give to Esav, but because he was blind and he did not recognize the fact that he was Yaakov, he gave him the blessing. And the Torah says that Yitzchak said he realized that there was possibly something wrong. And he said, Hakol Kol Yaakov, Now the voice of the person of my son speaking to me is the voice of Jacob. But Hayadayim the Esav. But when I touch his hands, his arms, I feel the hairiness of the arms, and it feels like it's Esav. So I'm somewhat confused, and so on. And this statement from Yitzchak is a very powerful statement because it ultimately indicates the relationship of Yaakov and Esav. In other words, even though Esav was a Rasha, you see it, he was a Rasha and he did many sins and so on, and Yaakov was a tzaddik and so on, very different than his brother, the older brother Esav. Esav was still the Bechor. He was still the firstborn because even though they were twins, Esav came out first. And what Yitzchak was saying to Yaakov, something about the relationship of these two that remains permanent. Even though Esav was his brother and lost the highest level of the brachos that Yaakov received, Yitzchak said to him, you are still Esav, you are still the Bechor. You cannot take that away from Esav because he was the firstborn, which was a fact. So Yitzchak said something that to Yaakov and Esav together that he meant. Yitzchak said that the world will someday come to an end, but the destiny of the world will ultimately be controlled by Yaakov, the descendants of Yaakov, and the descendants of Esav. You too will eventually reach someday a global significance, whereas all the nations of the world will fundamentally be mediocre. It is only you two, Yaakov and Esav, who your descendants will be the global representatives of chiefs of the world. But you will not be that at the same time fundamentally. When Esav will become the chief of the world, Yaakov will be low. And when Yaakov becomes the chief of the world, Esav will be low. So they're like a seesaw. In a seesaw, when the two people are at both ends of the seesaw, only one person at one end can be high and the other person is low. And he said that's the relationship between Yaakov and Esav. That when Yaakov is high, Esav, his brother, will be low. And when Esav is high, Yaakov, his brother, will be low. But the two will always be connected. Not only that, there's something else he said which is very important. Because Yitzchak said that even though Yaakov will be high because he's a tzaddik, it doesn't mean that Esav is cancelled. Because Esav is the Bechor, he will always retain that position, and he will always have to look out in a certain sense for Yaakov. So therefore, when Yaakov is on a low level because of his deeds, Esav will be the one that will rectify him. That's right. In other words, the two brothers will remain twins. They will never depart from each other. Even though Esav is a Rasha, he will be the person that will save his brother Yaakov when Yaakov is unable to do what he has to do and goes to a very low stature. So when Yaakov is on a stature where he has no teferes, when he has no beauty because of the sins of Yaakov, especially the sins between man and man, Esav will be the one that will rectify Yaakov. That's what Yitzchak said. So the bracha of Yitzchak is a very deep thing, and most people don't realize it. The fact that Yitzchak twinned Yaakov and Esav, that Esav would forever be the Bechor. He is the Bechor, and he will be the Bechor. And the responsibility of the Bechor is to take care of his younger brother when his younger brother fails. And this is what he said to Yaakov and Esav through the blessings and so on. So therefore, we have some knowledge and some understanding of what's going to happen by a negative Geula. The negative Geula means that if Yaakov doesn't bring the Geula, because Yaakov failed to be a Goy Kodesh and a Mamlechus Kahanim, because he failed to be an organism. So from Yitzchak's Bodka we see, therefore, that Esav will take over. Esav will become the substitute Mashiach. That's right. Esav, even though He is an unholy person, but he will take over the fundamental tasks of the Mashiach temporarily. And while he takes over the task of the Mashiach temporarily, Yaakov will be in the Golus of Esav. He will be in a certain exile in the lands of Esav. And in that exile, he will lose the function of taking over for the Yemos Mashiach temporarily. And Esav will do two things, two important things that we have to understand. The first thing, that Esav will become the surrogate Mashiach. That's right. When Yitzchak blessed Esav that he would, be the Yadayim, he said to him, you will be the hands of Esav, you will become the surrogate Mashiach when the Jews aren't capable of being the real Mashiach. You will then become the temporary Mashiach instead of them. Number one. Number two, there's something else that will happen. You will also be not only the temporary Mashiach, but you will also rectify the sins of Yaakov. Not only will you take over for them when they are unable to do their task, but you will be the rectifier. You will correct their deeds. You will bring a tahara to them when they were unable to bring a tahara to each other. You will be the source of their purification, the source of their rectification, the source of their rehabilitation. Yes, you, Esav, as the Bechor, will take care of your younger brother, Yaakov. And if your younger brother fails, even though you will remain a Russia, you will be the one that will take care of him and bring him back to the position that he originally had. You will bring him back to the level of Kedusha that he once had. You will do this, Esav, even though Yaakov cannot do it on his own. So we see this is what Yitzchak meant. What Yitzchak meant was that Esav would become the surrogate Mashiach, and he will bring the Torah to the world. That's right, instead of Yaakov. And what will he do to Yaakov? To what? What will he do to Yaakov to rectify him, to rehabilitate him? That's the question. Well, the answer is fundamentally that he will cause Yaakov enormous pain. Why? Because when Yaakov disrespects and hates his brother, he causes pain to God, so to speak. Because God is the Father. And therefore he causes great pain that God cannot bring openly the Yemos Mashiach. So the Jewish people have to suffer from pain in order to erase the pain that they give to God and they give to themselves. So Esav will therefore become a messenger who will deliver pain to Yaakov. He will become an anti-Semitic agent. He will become an anti-Semitic agent who will issue two things. He will become the surrogate Mashiach for the world, but at the same time, he will issue a certain enormous pain to Yaakov for the fact that he sins. And this is the concept of Yadayim is the Esav. The hands are the hands of Esav. Yaakov, Yitzchak was describing about Yaakov how he will bring the redemption. And Yitzchak was saying, Yaakov will bring the Regula, the redemption, how? By the coal, by the voice. What does that mean? He will bring the redemption by revealing the Torah to the world and revealing the knowledge of God to the world through the understanding of what Torah is and through the understanding of mitzvahs. But he has to bring the knowledge of God to the world by his actions. In other words, the world has to look. The world has to look at Yaakov as a paragon, as the son of God. How? Because they will not only see the knowledge of Yaakov, like he says in the Torah, Ki chochmaschem uvinaschem le'inei amim, is when the Goyim see the depths of knowledge contained in the Torah and the spirituality contained in the Torah, they will suddenly understand the level of insight, the level of wisdom, the level of knowledge that the Jews possess, which is far beyond anything which they possess. they will see this and so on and so forth. And they will become, and not only this, they will show the Goyim through their actions. How? Because they will show the Goyim what it means to respect a brother and a sister. The Goyim are constantly at war with each other. They are constantly fighting. They are constantly in conflict. And the Jewish people have to demonstrate as part of their mission, as being representatives of gods, that every man is a brother to every other man. Every man is a brother to his sister. And that between men there should be two things. There should be tranquility and peace, and there should be love. Every man must love his brother. That doesn't make a difference if you are a Jew to a Jew, or a Goy to a Goy, or a Jew to a Goy, or a Goy to a Jew. In all cases, all men, the human race, are the children of God. And therefore there has to be peace and love and respect amongst the children of God. And God wanted the Jews to exemplify this, to demonstrate this. That's why there are many mitzvahs in the Torah that have to do between man and man. Like, for example, it says, Lo yisoinu ishus amisoi. You shall not trouble another man. And Chazal learned this out. This means verbal abuse. The Torah actually says that you are not allowed to verbally abuse another man by screaming at him, by yelling at him, by insulting him, and so on. The Torah demands that the behavior between two people be a model of communication, where you can tell someone something, you can even criticize another person, but you do not shame him. It is a commandment in the Torah that you do not shame your fellow man under all conditions, and that you love your fellow man. And this is what the Jews should exemplify amongst each other. And when the Goyim see this, when they see what the Jews do to each other, they see how peaceful and respectful the Jews are. They will model it. They will see it, and they will take the Jews as a model. And they will therefore act this way. All of mankind will act this way. So the Jewish people, when they are kind to each other, when they are gentle to each other, when they are loving to each other, become the models of humanity. The models to humanity of the behavior that's required of the children of God. That's why when the Jews cease to be an organism, and they act in the opposite way, and they keep the mitzvahs between man and God, but not between man and man, that's like a joke. Because God says to them, what good is it if you keep the mitzvahs to me, but you have contempt for your fellow Jew? This is not the message that I want to send to the nations of the world, because the nations of the world are also my children. And I have sent you out to send them a message, how a person is supposed to act, not only to me, the Father, but how they're supposed to act to another person, their brother and sister. Whether you realize it or not, you are certainly a brother and sister to each other, to Jews, but you are also a brother and sister even to the Goyim, because they all have souls. They don't have souls the extent that you have, because you have a much higher Kedusha, because you keep this Torah. But they have a certain level of soul which makes them special. They have self-awareness. They exist as subjects, and not only as objects. In a certain way, they are also blessed. And therefore, I want them to be blessed through you. And that's why it says, as God says to Abraham, in you shall be blessed all the nations of the world. The Jews shall be blessed because they are guaranteed Olam Haba, and they can rectify their behavior. And the Goyim will be blessed because they will look at the Jews and they will see what they do. So when you give up the mitzvahs between man and man, you betray God. You betray them as the head of the family, so that your brothers who are Goyim see how you behave, and they don't respect you. That is the essence of anti-Semitism. The essence of anti-Semitism is not that the Goyim hate you because you don't obey their religions. That's not what it is. The essence of anti-Semitism is only because they see your behavior amongst each other. They see that you hate each brother. Every Jew hates another Jew, just like they hate another guy. In other words, they are the same as you. Or rather, you are the same as them. So therefore, the whole possibility of Kedusha that you have from the mitzvahs between man and God are canceled. They're irrelevant. Because suddenly they model your behavior between man and man, between Jew and Jew. And they say, well, if you are Rishayim to each other, we'll also be Rishayim to each other. So the Jews don't realize this powerful task and so on. So what it turns out, when this happens, there is no Yemosa Mashiach. There's no messianic period. The Jews have to go through a period of purification. Even though they're zocher to have the Nun Sha'arei Bina, the 50th gate, they are not worthy. They are truly not worthy of having a Mashiach and a messianic period. They have to be rectified. And who will rectify them? And the answer is, Yitzchak said this, they will be rectified by their brother Esav, because he is still their brother. How? Because Esav will become a surrogate Mashiach. Instead of the Jews being Mamlechet Kohanim, Esav will become the Mamlechet Kohanim. And they will train mankind to, in a certain way, with the knowledge of Torah. That's right. Esav will train the world with Torah. Esav will bring forth, will popularize Torah thinking. Not the Jews. Esav will do this. And Esav will do a second task. Esav will also cause the Jews pain. And this is very important. And I'll give you a model what this means. If you take a scale with two different cups in the scale, and if you put down a weight in one cup on the right side, right? And what does that cup represent? That cup represents on the right side with a weight in the cup so that the cup suddenly goes down and the other cup goes up. And what does that weight represent? That weight represents how every Jew treats another Jew. So every time a Jew treats another Jew with contempt, with disrespect, with lack of love, with evil, he forces that cup to go down. And what about the other cup? Well, the other cup, God says, will be filled with what? With Esav. The right cup, side of the cup, is filled with Yaakov. And his sins are represented by a weight in that cup. And on the left side of the cup, that cup will be put down with what? With also pains. In other words, but that will be the pain that Esav inflicts on Yaakov. So what do we see? We see suddenly that the two cups will be balanced. They will be on the same level. How? Because for every time a Jew insults, criticizes, and shames another Jew, every time a Jew steals from another Jew, that's right, or does something harmful to another Jew, guess what? Esav will do that to the Jewish people, or to that Jew. The Jews will make themselves a victim of Esav. Esav will have the power, because God says, I will make Esav the strongest nation on earth. That's right. And I will give them tremendous strength. And therefore, every time that Jews punish each other and transgress with each other, then Esav, with his anti-Semitism, will punish the Jews in the exact amount that they punish each other. It is impossible for a Jew to have any kind of pain from an anti-Semite. There is no such thing as an anti-Semite. And the anti-Semite is created, Esav, or whoever it is, that's created by the Jews. There is no such thing as an anti-Semite itself. Anti-Semites are created by the Jews because of their behavior to the Jews. So suddenly, Esav, Goyim of the Esav, they will punish the Jews with similar pain. And this is the cause of Jewish suffering throughout history. This pain comes from Esav, and it's specifically the task of Esav to cause them pain when the Jews cause each other pain. And this is what it means when Chazal say, halacha, it is a fact. Esav soine is Yaakov. Esav hates Yaakov. So the question is, why do the sages tell us that Esav hates Yaakov? We know that. Esav is all anti-Semites. They have been hurting Jews throughout the last 2,000 years. And what causes this? What causes them to hate the Jews and so on and so forth? So Chazal, what the sages tell us, no, that is not simply a fact of anti-Semitism. That is the purpose of Esav. You must understand the purpose of Esav is to not only rectify the world instead of the Jews as a surrogate Mashiach, but the purpose of Esav is to give a purification to Jews. In other words, Esav will give pain for pain. Every pain that the Jew causes to another Jew will be inflicted on him by Esav, causing that pain to him, to anti-Semitism, by hurting him, by killing him. The whole actions of Esav against the Jews in an anti-Semitic form comes as an exact resemblance to what the Jew did to another Jew. So therefore, Esav will maintain the balance of the scale, to the extent that the right side of the scale goes down because of its weight of its sins. Esav will cause pain to the Jews because of the sins of the Jews. And that's what Yitzhak means. That Yaakov brings the goal of the redemption through the kol, through the voice, through Torah. But Esav brings the redemption. How? Through his hands, by violence, by pain, by hurting the Jew, through the continuous acts of anti-Semitism that he has exhibited for the last 2,000 years. But God says this will bring the redemption. In other words, if the Jews do not listen to the Torah in terms of his relationship with another Jew and what he requires to do for another Jew, if he refuses to be Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazer, he refuses to be an organism with other Jews, then I will assign the task to Esav, his older brother, the Bechor, and I will assign him to become what? To become the punisher of the Jewish people. And he will bring a purification to the Jews. He will purify the Jews when the Jews cannot purify themselves. So therefore, Esav soines Yaakov. It is not a fact that Esav will hate Yaakov. No, it's their task. It's their purpose that Esav has to hate the Jewish people. Because as long as the Jewish people hate themselves and behave in a way which is despicable amongst themselves, and they're always fighting and shaming each other in a certain way, so Esav must hate them as a result. Esav is a Rasha, but the way he will purify the Jews is by causing them pain. And as I said to you last time, very important, how does Esav purify Jews? With pain. The answer is he will kill them. There are many Jews that will be killed from the hands of Esav. Because God says, I cannot make you an organism. By loving each other and by living, then I will recreate you as an organism by dying at the hands of Esav. Esav will murder you by the millions. But they will murder you as Jews, as a nation of Jews. And when they murder you as a nation of Jews, this is your purification. Because since you cannot live as Jews, as an organism, you will die as an organism. And that will be satisfactory. So we see the deep mystery of anti-Semitism. We see the purpose of anti-Semitism. That God will do this. We see what God is doing. We see why the Goyim hate us. Why we have been, for 2,000 years, afraid of Esav, between pogroms, between inquisitions, between holocausts. Everything comes to us because of what we do to each other. And this is the tachlis of Esav, and this is the blessing of Yaakov. Now, how does Esav become an anti-Semite? That's an interesting point. So now we understand the purpose of Esav and the relationship of Esav to the Jews and what God is doing. But the question now is, how does Esav give Torah thinking to the world? How does Esav produce a Mashiach? I mean, come on. The Mashiach has nothing to do with Esav. So how does Esav take on the messianic role? This is the question that we have to answer. And I'm going to try and answer this question in a way, and it'll be shocking. Because Esav is Rome, is Edom. And what did Rome become eventually in the year 300, in the 3rd century ACE? What happened to Rome? Rome became a Christian nation. That's right. Constantine decided to make the whole Roman Empire a Christian nation. That's right. And he instituted a council and a conference called the Council of Nicaea. And in that conference, he said to them, you have to establish yourself and your religion in a certain way. Whatever it is, you have to remove the disagreements between you, and you have to become one religion. So the Christians then decided certain features would appear in the religion called Christianity. So let's look and see certain things. What is Christianity? What exactly are these messianic features that Christianity possesses? Well, the fact of the matter is, in essence, if you walked into the Vatican, which you shouldn't do, but let's say you walked into the Vatican and you saw in front of you the Pope was giving a lecture to a whole bunch of Christians. What would you think? Well, you would say, this man who's giving a lecture, he's called the Pope. Okay. So what kind of person is he? So you look at his begodim, you look at his clothes, and you say to yourself, well, these look like the clothes of the Kohen Gadol. You know what I mean? These look like clothes similar to the ones of the Kohen Gadol. And what is he doing? You say to yourself, well, he's talking Tehillim. He's saying Psalms. He's saying Psalms, and he's talking about certain principles in Judaism. Not only is saying the Psalms, but he is saying that the function of Christianity is fundamentally to love God. Wait a minute, you as a Jew says. He's telling everyone in the audience to love God. Wow. He's saying God is holiness, that you have to love God and you have to love each other. Well, that sounds like a Jewish concept. So this guy up front, who's called the Pope, he must be Jewish. He's saying Tehillim, and he's talking about the love of God. The truth is, whenever you hear a Christian evangelist talking, they're always talking about loving God. You don't hear this so much from Jews, not at all. You hear Jews should love Torah. Jews always speak about loving Torah, but very rarely do you hear Jews talking about that you have to love God. Very rarely is it the essence of Judaism. The essence of Judaism is of the Torah. Okay, that's true. But very rarely do they talk about loving God and so on, and loving your fellow Jew. Rarely. But when you see this person in front of you, he's talking about loving God, he's reading from Tehillim, and he's dressed like a Kohen Gadol. So now you're becoming impressed. And you see another thing, that this person is talking about putting yourself in water, submerging yourself in water to purify yourself, to make yourself holy. So you say to yourself, wow, that's a tevilah. This person, the Pope, is talking about a mikveh. He's talking about a mikveh where a person goes down into the water and purifies himself. Wow. So therefore I see how many different aspects of this concept. I see the aspect of loving God. I see his clothes. I see him learning Tehillim. You know what I mean? I see him going to a mikveh. Well, wait a minute. This guy must be a Rosh Hashiva of some sort, And then finally, this person is speaking, and he's speaking about the Mashiach. He's speaking about the fact that there was a person who would sacrifice himself so that all the people should be able to see the Yemos Mashiach. He is talking about the kingdom of God. Well, wow, this guy sounds like a real Rosh Hashiva. He's talking about that eventually the world will be knowledgeable about the kingdom of God. We are all headed to the kingdom of God. That's what he's saying. And he's saying not only that this person has to sacrifice himself to an enemy in order to atone for mankind. Well, that's a Jewish concept. The concept of a tzaddik atoning for his people by giving up his life is a Jewish concept. That's right. There were many tzaddikim. The Gemara says that whenever pains come to the Jews, it's maschelesim tzaddikim. The pain that goes to the Jews starts with tzaddikim. They are the first ones to feel the pain. In fact, the Torah says very clearly the concept of sov l'chaloyim, that there are certain Jews, certain tzaddikim that are characteristic because they suffer. But they don't suffer because of their own sins. They suffer because of the sins of the Jews. So the concept of a tzaddik suffering for the sins of the Jews is a Jewish concept. So you're saying, wow, this guy really is something. This guy knows his Judaism, you know? And so he looks like a Rosh Yeshiva, and he talks like a tzaddik. Well, that's what it looks like, doesn't it? But suddenly this man does something which doesn't make any sense. Suddenly he veers away from Judaism. You see, this man is wearing a yarmulke. He's wearing clothes that look like a Kohen Gadol. He loves God, and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? He's talking about the pain that that the Mashiach, you know, has so that to save his people. And these are all Jewish concepts. But suddenly he does something that no one else does. He turns to the figure on the wall where there's a cross and there's a man hanging on the cross. And he says, this is your Messiah. This is the Mashiach. His name was Jesus. So you say to yourself, well, I never heard of that. You know what? Okay, look, who am I to say who the Mashiach and who's not? We don't know who the Mashiach is. Maybe Jesus is Mashiach and so on. And that's what he says. But you can't fault him for that because you can call yourself a Mashiach or say that this guy's the Mashiach and there's no Issa. There's no prohibition of this. Why? Because the Mashiach can be anybody. The person may be wrong. The person is not Mashiach, but that's not a sin just because he made that mistake. But then suddenly he says something else, and boom, he says, this man on the cross died for our sins because he is the Messiah. He is the Mashiach. But not only is he the Mashiach, he is God. Wow. Where did that come from? He is the Son of God because God is a triplicate. God is a Trinity. God, the Father, Jesus, the Son of God, and the Holy Ghost. And these are all three components of God. So Jesus is not simply a Messiah. He is the Messiah because he is God. So you say, wait a minute. I never heard of this. This is impossible. You know, a man cannot be a God. This is ridiculous. This is shameful. So suddenly you realize he is not Jewish. He is not a Rosh Yeshiva. He is not a tzaddik. He is not a gadol. This guy is a min. This guy is a non-believer. This guy is a Russia. Now, what have I just described? What have I just described about Esav? This is the religion of Esav, the religion of Jesus, the religion of the Mashiach, but also the religion of God, that Jesus is God, that besides God the Father, there is also Jesus the God himself. And he died by being God. God sacrificed his only son, Jesus, so that he can redeem all the people on the earth. That's called Christianity. And that's what they hold. In the year, in 323, I think, in the ACE, Constantine forced the Christians to develop Christianity as a religion. Before this, there were not many people who considered themselves Christians, but they considered themselves disciples of Jesus. Jesus was not God. You know what I mean? He was not God. There were thousands and thousands of people who didn't see Jesus as God. They saw him as a tzaddik. they saw that what he says was like from the Torah. They thought he was a big tzaddik, and they called him the Mashiach. But Constantine forced the conference to suddenly call Jesus God, and suddenly the Gospels, which is the Christian Bible, was instituted as the ultimate holy books written by the Gospels themselves, by the students of Jesus. So therefore, Christianity is a bizarre religion. It's a takeoff from Judaism. Really, it's a takeoff. It never existed before. It's a complete distortion of Judaism because it holds of the many of the same ideas that we hold of Judaism, but it says the one idea which is totally obtuse. It is completely erroneous that Jesus is God. So therefore, what was God doing to Esav? God was giving a new religion to Esav. Esav is Rome, and Rome became Christian. And God wanted them to cover the earth, to conquer the earth. That's right. God wanted the Christians and the belief in Jesus as God and as a Mashiach to conquer the earth and to spread all over the earth, so that the earth is now filled with the Christian religion. He wanted that. Why did he want that? Because they would hate the Jews. Why? Because Jesus himself was Jewish. They rejected this idea. They said this is a foreign idea, an alien idea. This is a false idea. Jesus is not God, and not only is he not God, he is not the Mashiach. A man could be a Mashiach, but a man cannot be God. Jesus did not create the universe, every galaxy in the universe. Jesus does not rule human history. Jesus is not in total control, an absolute unity that God is. And this is a false belief. But why did God do this? God gave the success to the Christians to not only develop their religion from Rome, but to conquer the planet, because Christians became the mightiest power on earth. Why did God do this? Because he wanted the Christians to become two things. He wanted them to spread the Torah. That's right. Many of the concepts in Christianity are concepts in the Torah, like loving God and loving man. That's what Christianity is. And these are Jewish concepts. So therefore, what's happening is that Esav is teaching mankind to be loving to each other and to be loving to God. Can you believe this? Esav is now teaching mankind to do this. And Esav hates the Jews because Jesus was Jewish. And the Jews refused to accept him. And therefore the Jews are considered responsible for his death, because the Romans, they destroyed Jesus on the cross and so on. So even though it was 300 years later that Jesus became the Messiah and the God of the Christians, this was not true of all. Because of the fact that the Jews never accepted Jesus. They never accepted this bastardized form of Judaism. Christianity is a mamzer, is a bastardized form of Judaism. But God made it successful. He made sure that it would be successful throughout the world. Why? Because he was appointing another Mashiach. That's right. Christianity in its essence is a messianic religion. It is a belief in the Mashiach, but the Mashiach is Jesus. And it's a belief in a messianic religion. So these are Torah concepts. It is. And Christianity has transmitted these concepts throughout the world as a surrogate Mashiach. That's right. Christianity is a surrogate Mashiach coming from Esav to teach the world the concept of Mashiach, to teach the world the concept of kingdom of heaven, to teach the world the concept of loving God, and so on. These are now taught to mankind by the Christians. God wanted this, but the Christians also became at the same time anti-Semites. And therefore the Christians, because of the hatred of the Jews, have to convince the Jews that they're right. And they have to convince them how? By converting Jews to Christians. So therefore they cause enormous pain to Jews. They have been responsible since the 8th century, and I'll explain that much later. But they are responsible for what? For the church fathers are responsible for the doctrine of anti-Semitism that pervades the Christian world. They are responsible for the Inquisition, the fact that Spain murdered or killed throughout their whole population. They are responsible for pogroms, killing Jews en masse in Eastern Europe, in Western Europe, and so on. They are responsible for all these things. They are responsible for pogroms, for the Inquisition, and the Crusades. The Christians went down from Europe, down to Eretz Israel, to the land of Israel. Why? Because they wanted to reconquer the land of Israel. For Christians, they were unable to do this. But they tried to reconquer the reconquest of Eretz Israel during the Crusades. There were several Crusades, and all of them were about Christians going to Eretz Israel to reconquer Israel for the Christians and so on. But while they were going down from Europe to Israel, they murdered thousands and thousands of Jews in this thing. In fact, when they went down through one town, I forget the name of the town, they put to the knife, they stabbed Rabbeinu Tam 7 times. They almost killed Rabbeinu Tam. And he barely survived with his life. They created all the concept of pogroms. They created the concept of a Holocaust. Because fundamentally the Christians completely conceded to Hitler, the Pope, conceded Hitler that it's all right if you kill Jews, that the Jews are the worst things that were ever created by mankind. So fundamentally, it was Christianity that was behind the murder of millions and millions of Jews. Who did this? God did this. Because this is what a concept of a negative Geula. This is the Geula. This is. In other words, God said there will be a Mashiach. That's right. Who will promote the knowledge of Torah. That's right. But who was that? That's not a Jewish Mashiach. That wasn't Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef. That was a Christian Mashiach, and the Christian Mashiach is considered to be God himself. He is a unity with God himself. So why did God do this? Because the only way God can make Esav into an anti-Semitic nation is by Esav being jealous of the religion of the Jews and saying, we are now the Jews. That's right. When you talk to a Christian, really, he considers himself the real Jew. It's a new covenant, the Bris Chadasha, a new covenant. Christians believed that they have taken over a new covenant, that they are now the new Jews of the world. It is their task to makav the world to the B'nai Shalom. It is their task to bring the world to the knowledge of God and the knowledge of Jesus. They consider themselves the new Jews, and I mean it. You may not realize this, but every Christian refers himself to as the Bris Chadasha, the new covenant. And that covenant is that he has replaced God. He has placed the Jews. God has replaced the Jews with the Christians. And the Christians are now represent the doctrine of Jesus, the doctrine of the Mashiach, and the doctrine of Jesus as God. And the Christians act like that. They think that they are Jews. They are now, it's their task to be a Mamluch Kohanim. It's their task to go over the world and convert every nation. And that's what the Christians have been doing for 1,000 years. Why do you think the Christians were able to conquer so many nations of the world? Do you realize that the Christians controlled the world in the time of Queen Victoria? Britain had the greatest empire of the world. It controlled, the sun never set on the British Empire. The British controlled Africa and America, and they controlled India, they controlled China, every country on earth. You know that? Why? Because God gave them Hatzlacha. God gave a certain amount of holiness by having their Christianity similar to Judaism, and he gave them a certain amount of the task of converting the world to Christianity. They would become the Messianic people. That's right. Because they teach the world. They have made the world into bastardized Jews, but they have made the Goyim are now new Jews. They are not simply Goyim. They consider themselves the Jewish people, who are the Messianic people. who have to represent God to the world. They don't consider the Jews as these people. They call it the Judeo-Christian. But that's not because the Jews are a messianic people, because the Jews originated the idea of Mashiach. But the one who completes the idea, the one who actually converts the world to the knowledge of God and the love of man and the love of God and holiness, is the Christianity. And they rule the world. They are the greatest nation on earth. The Christians have become the greatest nation on earth for the last 100 years. And who did this? God. God himself. The God we worship, because this is what God said to us. On the day that you cease to be an organism, you will not have a positive gula. You will not have a gula where you will be the Mamach Kohanim and the Goy Kodesh. But instead, I will make Esav by the Baruch of Yitzchak. Esav will become the Jewish nation on the world. They will bring Torah knowledge to the whole world. Because Christianity is based on Torah knowledge. They will bring holiness to the world, you see it. They will convert the world to Christianity. And they will hate the Jews because the Jews refuse to accept Jesus. And therefore, that's how I get them to be anti-Semitic. And with the pain that they inflict on the Jewish people, that pain will restore the Jewish people. It will bring back the Jewish people to Kedusha for Tahara. And then finally, at the end of time, when the Jews have suffered enough and they finally realize what their sin of Chinam has done to themselves, they will do tshuva. They will really do tshuva. And then I will restore them to become the messianic people who I want to convert the world. It's the Jews who will convert. And what will happen to Esav? They will give up Christianity. They will abandon Christianity. I will see to it that at the end of time, Esav will abandon Christianity. In fact, they will lose respect for the priests. And that's happened in our time because of all the sexual molestation that Christians have done, that priests have done. Right now, the priests have become terrible reputation because thousands and thousands of priests has molested thousands and thousands of kids. So Christianity has taken a tremendous drop. And this is a sign. This is a sign of the beginning of the end of Christianity. That's right. It's coming back to us. But we have to do final tshuva. We have to do final tshuva on the way we treat other Jews. And then we will be restored as a Mamlechas Kohanim, as a kingdom of priests. And we will bring the Kedusha v'Tahara to the entire world. So this fundamentally is the main property of the concept that we're saying that God will institute a substitute Mashiach who will be a Mamlechas Kohanim and believe that they are the Jewish people now. And this is what he has done. He has given a bracha to Christians. He has allowed them to develop a religion which contains the idea of Kedusha and Torah and Torah concepts. He has then suddenly what? He has suddenly popularized Christianity, so it has transmitted itself throughout the world. Christians are billions of people in the world, and the Jews, barely 16 million. Why is this doing? Why did God do this? Because we failed to be an organism. So they are the substitute Mashiach. They are the substitute deliverers of the Torah to mankind. They have that power, and they therefore are the ones who inflict pain on us. So this is a negative gula. This is what it means. It's a redemption. Why? Because the world has come back to God. Okay, it's come back to Jesus. It's come back to Christianity, but it has come back to God. It is no longer pagan. It doesn't worship idols, basically. The world does not worship idols. It has come back to God, but in a negative way, because they see the Mashiach as God himself, and that's an avodah zorah as far as Jews is concerned. But for the Goyim, it's a higher madrega of Goyim. You cannot compare a Goy who's a pagan, who worships idols, you see it, and worships stars and planets, to a Goy who's a Christian. because God has decided that he will appear to the Christians and they will be able to worship him. Because the purpose of a Christian is what? It's to purify a Jew and to also begin to purify mankind. This is what we mean by a negative redemption. Yes, the redemption is happening. That's true. But it's happening in a negative way and by a negative person, Esav and Rome. So this is the concept of how I'm starting. So therefore, I'm beginning to talk to you about the structure of Yemei Mashiach. The structure of the Yemei Mashiach is unlike what you consider. Most Jews today have no idea what's going on with Christianity, why God created Christianity, why he gave them hatzlacha, why he gave them success, why God gave them a bracha. Why did God do that? Since they're such anti-Semites and they've killed millions of Jews, because these people are now representing the Mashiach, because we have defaulted. We are not an organism anymore, and we can't stop hating each other. So God therefore changed the polarity of the Yemei Mashiach from positive to negative. But God will one day restore the Messianic enterprise to a positive one, and the Jewish people again will recapture that thing. So next time I'm going to talk about other properties. This is only the first property that I'm talking about, the concept of Christianity. Next time we're going to talk about another 5 properties which indicate that we are in the Yemei Mashiach. I've only spoken about one of the major properties of the concept of Christianity. And next time I will talk about another 5 of them, which all point to the fact that we are already in the Messianic period. Okay, that's the share.
Reb Shimon, I was just curious, with all this purification over the past, what do you say, 1,000, 1,500 years of Esav doing his job on us, how come we haven't gotten more organismic now?
The Jews, when it says in the Torah, Am Kshei Oref, that the Jews are a stubborn people, that's why. We will talk about that soon. Why have the Jews learned their lesson? We will talk about why they continuously speak Lashon Hara, Rechilas, why they have sinas chinam, why they are constantly fighting with each other and downgrading each other instead of praying for each other. But that's what it is. They're Am Kshei Oref. They're a stubborn people. And unfortunately, this is what God has to do. Because God will either bring back the Jews in their life or in their death. And that will bring the Yemei Mashiach. Any other questions?
If Shimon, are you going to discuss in future shiurim why the period of Nevuah left pretty much at the same time that we entered this Shnei Allah from the Yemei Mashiach, this negative gula that we're going to now?
I will definitely, yes. That has to do with the concept of Haskalah. It has to do with the concept of Haskalah, which very few people realize. And I'm going to discuss that next time. As I discuss the 5 properties, trust me, I'm going to discuss every major property of the Yemei Mashiach, how it exists today and for the last 2,000 years. But it exists in negativity. It exists in the Klippas. It's said to be in the Klippas in Golus. Every property of the Messianic period is in Golus and is in exile. But it exists today also and exists for the last 2,000 years. But I will discuss this for the next couple of weeks.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I believe there's a Ramdu that says that that Jesus was a Mashiach when Yosef that went bad.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, the Ari says that Jesus is the. Well, I didn't say it, but I have to say it. Jesus is the. Actually, are we still on record?
Yeah, we're still on record.
Well, I'll read, or Yitzhak Luria says that the word Yeshu, which means for Jesus, Yud Shin, Vav Ayin, if you rearrange the letters, it's Esav. The Ari says that Jesus is a Gilgul, a reincarnation of Esav himself. So not only does Esav have to serve the function of this, but Esav himself has the name Esav in his name. Esav is not only the principle, Esav is the person. Esav is the person who was reincarnated as Jesus in order to be a purifier of the Jewish people and bring them back to who they were.
Yeah, Ramdu says that too, but see, that makes sense because Esav was supposed to be the Yosef, right?
Yeah, but I don't know if Esav was supposed to be the Mashiach ben Yosef. Because Esav was a mamzer also. And the Mashiach ben Yosef is not a mamzer.
1 second, Esav is supposed to be a Yosef? Esav is a mamzer?
Yeah.
No, you meant Yashka. You meant Yashka, not Esav.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean Jesus is a mamzer.
Yeah.
The name Jesus, if you turn the letters around in Hebrew,
type of Yosef, meaning it's the other side of the coin of Yosef.
If you turn the letters of the word, excuse me. Jesus, the name Jesus in Hebrew is Yeshua. If you change those letters around, you will get the name Esav. Esav is the reincarnation of Jesus, and so on. So not only did God, when God brought Jesus to the world, not only did he bring the principle of that Jesus would represent Christianity, but Jesus is actually Esav himself in a reincarnated form. That would be that person. So the bracha of Yitzchak really is powerful. You have no idea how powerful that bracha is.
When you say that it's measure for every guy that kills a yid did the same to another yid. You have to show me gas chambers. You have to show me Spanish Inquisition. Last time I checked, Jews never did that to other Jews. I'm sorry, Shimon. It's very sharp.
Excuse me, what are you talking about? Jews never did what?
You're saying he's talking about the sin of China, not killing other Jews.
Measure for measure. Exactly what they did, what Goyim do to Jews, Jews do to Jews. That's the words of Shimon used. That's very sharp.
Up to that point.
I haven't heard of a case that Yidden did gas chambers to other Yidden.
No, I didn't say that they did to other Jews necessarily everything that the Nazis did. I said in certain ways, and I didn't go into it, the pain that Jews cause other Jews in all the ways that they cause pain. You know what I mean? Warranted their death from the Esav. Now, exactly how? I'm not saying. We don't really clearly know. But God is clearly judging them with death. Now, why did God judge the people with death? It's either the Jews or actually it's Gilgulim before the Jews, and so on. But we don't know exactly which people are doing what to which people in terms of where they come from. We have no idea of this. But it's a cheshbon that which is Esav is doing to the Jews in certain ways has to do with people who are Jews either as Ben Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the sons of Avraham, and so on. But even as before Avraham, even before the Dor HaMabul or the Dor HaMidbar, we don't know the full extent of where souls come from and where they relate to. We don't know that, But without question, this is a tahara for the Jews. The Holocaust was the greatest tahara for the Jews, and it was able to start the Geula. I mean, that's what it was. But how it works and so on, I didn't say that that's what Jews did to other Jews. I never said that. You're saying that. I never said that. And all I'm simply saying is that their death. Okay, good. I'm glad you clarified that.
Yeah, because you were talking about the weights on the scales. It sounded like they were both the same.
But you see, in a certain sense, the death of Jews by Christians in history is fundamentally the death of Jews as Jews. This is what God wants, that since you cannot be an organism, by your choices and by your mitzvahs, you will be an organism in your death. In other words, Christians only kill Jews. Why? Because they're Jews. They don't kill Jews because they did this or they did that and so on and so forth. It's not a personal thing. It's a collective thing. And when the Jews generally die, like in the Crusades, or in the Inquisition, or in pogroms, or in the Holocaust, all these Jews that died, they only die because in some way they're dying as an organism. And that's the main thing. God is giving them this death as an organism so that in their death they obtain the Kedusha of the organism of the Jewish people. But we cannot know, and we do not know, and I don't know if we'll ever know, or probably will know at the end of time, who these Jews are, why every Jew died the way he died. And in a certain sense, we see this relationship. There's a certain relationship between Christianity and Judaism and the Jews. That Christianity has the assignment of being the greatest anti-Semites in history, and they are. And the greatest anti-Semites, not because the Jews, they wanted to conquer the Jews, or because they wanted to take their money, or they want to take their possessions. No, that's not why Christians hate Jews. Christians hate Jews because they are Jews, period. And no nation really had such a level of anti-Semitism before. Even Rome and even Greece and so on and so forth. They hated Jews. But it was because those Jews did not want to they didn't want to service these Babylonians and so on. I mean, he had no intention of killing Jews because they were Jews. He wanted to conquer that nation to take away their possessions and their sovereignty. He wanted to be in control as the absolute dictator. But Christians are not looking to be the absolute dictator. They're looking to kill Jews. Why? Because they won't become Christians. They defy Christians. And in their defiance of Christianity, they create a tremendous doubt among Christians of their own religion, because Jesus was fundamentally Jewish. And it's a tremendous thing to say that your religion is based on Jews. It's based on a Jew. Christianity, I mean, they don't realize they actually worship a Jew. As much as they hate Jews because they rejected Jesus, they worship a Jew. I mean, this is the ultimate oxymoron. So they have to justify this. And the main way they justify this is if the Jews accept Jesus as their savior. That's why they need the Jews' acquiescence to justify that Jesus is a Messiah and a Son of God. And the Jews will not give them that. So it leaves them with a certain dent. It sees them with a certain wound in their Christianity. So therefore, Christians are anti-Semites like no other nation in history. Because the Christians are compelled to hate Jews, compelled to kill Jews or whatever it is, if they don't become Christians. Because it means that there's a suffix, there's a doubt in their very religion. Babylonia didn't believe that there was a doubt in the Babylonian religion, which worshipped Marduk and Ishtar and so on. They didn't have a problem with Jews not worshipping Ishtar and Marduk. They had no problem. They simply wanted to conquer the Jewish people and take whatever they have, their gold, silver, their land. They were world conquerors. And that's what it was. But Christianity is different. Their anti-Semitism comes because the Jewish people will refuse to recognize their truth. It's truth. They believe in Christianity as truth, and the Jews refuse to recognize truth. In Babylonia, the Babylonians didn't need the Jews to recognize Marduk or Ishtar. The Persians didn't need the Jews to recognize their gods. They didn't need it. They accepted the Jews. The Greeks did not need to have the Jews worship their gods and so on and so forth. They wanted simply the Jews to completely obey these world powers. And Rome didn't require Jews to worship Jupiter. They didn't require it. But the Christians require the Jews to worship Jesus. unlike anyone before. They are natural anti-Semites. That's what Chazal mean. Esav Sonis Yaakov. This is their job. Their job is to hate Jews and to punish Jews and so on and so forth in one way or another. And ultimately, the ultimate way they'll punish these people is by making them an organism. So it's very different. Christianity is a very different type of entity. It's a messianic entity. Only Christianity can bring the Jews back to Moshe Mashiach in the way what it was, in the way that it is. And it's designed specifically to cause tremendous pain to the Jewish people, because of that and so on. Now, why the Jews have to die for what sins, I don't know. We have no idea the underlying truth of what's causing the death of these Jews in terms of what they've done to other Jews. I don't know.
Understood.
Okay. Thank you for listening. And next week we'll again continue on this topic.